Okay, so last time we figured out how to get a button working. This time we're going to add the second button. And in a certain sense, this one, we don't even need to involve the main class at all. However, we are going to need to be able to reference the button that we want to work with, and so we are going to need to add another public declaration in there. But first, void enable toggle. Okay. And now I'll come up here and I will set that class. So public game object button. Some people use abbreviation for button. There's a lot of different styles that you can use for variable naming, class naming, that kind of thing. Whatever suits you. I like to use long names just to make it clear. Toggle text. Okay. Like so. That should work pretty well. Okay. And so now with that defined, I can actually refer to it. But again, set active, as we already saw, it just makes it disappear, and that's not what I wanted to do. I actually want to get a particular component or a particular field, okay, out of this and set it to where it will work for me. Okay. And that component is the button. So let me go over here and let's go look at that button itself, toggle text. And we go over here and we look, and even though it's a button, it has its own internal component button and a field called interactable. Okay, so I need to get that particular component. Let's go get that back. So to do that, I will do get component. And here's something, if you haven't seen this before, this is called generics, because there's many different kinds of components that can be associated with a game object. And so I want to tell it in particular, I want a button component. Okay, so that's what a generic is. And your generic is just a type name that is in the greater than, less than symbols as marking a tag, okay, for the type of component I want. And this is a function. And so that will return the function, or excuse me, that will return the button component. And then in the button component, I want interactable, that field that we saw. So let me drag this over just to remind you. Okay, so the button component has a field called interactable. Okay. And I want to make that true. So that will enable that field. Now, by the same token, and I'm just going to go ahead and copy this, Control C, go over to main, and over here where I set it inactive, which was not what we wanted it to do, instead, I'm going to make it false for interactable. Okay, and so that won't make it disappear. That'll just make it inactive. Okay. And so now I can go ahead and file, save these. Save both. Okay, come back to this, and it's going to compile the scripts and tell me I did something wrong. Type or namespace button could not be found. Why? Did I miss a using statement somewhere? Probably. So I go back to my code. Have a look. Let's see. I'm using, wait a minute. Using Unity engine.ui. Let's see if that doesn't make a difference. Okay, file, save. Where is it? Let's come back to this. And the error went away. So again, sometimes that message that says, are you missing an assembly or something, usually means you forgot a using statement. You know, and you get used to that. You start learning what these error message means. If you got confused by them, and I certainly did when I started programming in Unity, and so the way I figured out what they meant was I Googled them. I just copied and pasted the whole error message right into Google and came up with a whole bunch of answers that eventually let me figure it out. And when I say eventually, usually it took like, less than 10, 15 minutes to get the right answer and to understand it. This is the way you learn to do this stuff and the way you learn to fix your common errors. And this is one for me. I'm always forgetting the right using statements. Okay. So, okay, now we've done that. There's one other thing we have to do, which is associate the onClick. So as before, onClick, the list is empty. We need a function in there, and that function has to come from the button handler. And when I click on the drag down button handler, notice I have toggle text, but enable toggle is in there now too. And so I'll set that. Okay. And so now we should all be good to go unless I've forgotten something again. So we'll go ahead and, that didn't work because it was running. So I'm going to have to redo that. Button toggle, list is empty. Anything that you do while the project is running is only temporary. So I will drag over the button handler and I will select the enable toggle function. And now I will play it. And notice that the button went disabled. So the start in the main script actually disabled it without making it disappear this time. Okay. So if everything's working when I click on enable toggle, what is that? Button variable button toggle text a button handler. Once again, and I need to stop this. Once again, I set a public variable and forgot to set it in here. So button toggle text, I need to name that object, and it is that one. There it is. Okay. So now it should be able to work. So I will go ahead and rerun it. Well, yeah, save it. Rerun it. That's disabled. And now this should enable. And there it is, it's enabled. I don't have a toggle for this, but we could go back and rewrite that code a little bit to make it work. And then once it's enabled, it's like that. So let's go and make that little change. You can see how you can develop in pieces like this. So we go to button handler and this should be pretty straightforward. If, okay, and I'll just copy this whole thing. So if it's true, and that needs to be equal, if that's true, then let's see, curly braces, bing, okay, control V again, but I want to make it false. Else, curly braces, make it true. So another toggle. Okay. All right. So that should be work. Let's give it a save. Go back to the project. It compiles, hopefully without errors. Yep, no errors. Okay. The compiling doesn't have anything to do with whether it's running or not. So now it should be fine. I stopped it from running because I always forget to do that. And now if I run it this time, and it starts up disabled, and I toggle it on, and I toggle it off, toggle it on, toggle it off. As long as it's off, it doesn't do anything. When it's toggled on, it'll change the text. And so I've got this little piece of code working just beautifully. And so just a brief recap of the things we've seen. We've seen the difference between activating and deactivating an object versus making it interactable or not. We've learned how to connect scripts to objects using public variables of the proper type. We have learned how to actually get a piece of code or a script from one object to call code or script from another object, okay, so that button handler can call functions that are in main, and vice versa, actually. Sometimes you will have code that calls, back and forth like that. So we've pretty much covered a lot of basics, and we can start writing some stuff now. So where we're going to go from here is to enable some complexities that show you some other features of programming in C. Now again, I didn't bother to explain how an if statement works. I won't bother to explain how loops work or switch statements or anything like that. Any basic programming you should already know how to do. Things that you may not be familiar with, like the generics. Their generics are very similar to generics in Java, but other languages don't use generics. So I'll spend a little bit of time explaining those things as they come up. But everything else is basically dependent on you digging into this thing. And so now that we've done this, play with this. See what you can do. Because you can now create buttons. You can now deal with text. You can probably figure out how to do images and stuff, how to disable and enable parts of a interface and such. And it's just a good idea to play with it a little bit so you start seeing what kind of mistakes you're going to make and get those mistakes fixed. Okay. When we come back next time, we're going to go a little bit more complicated.